Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Mind Marie. Today, I'm thrilled to be joined by Bernie Wagenblast, a voice actor best known as one of the voices of the New York City subway system. Bernie also contributed to Lin-Manuel Miranda and Issa Davis's Warriors album, playing the train conductor, and has shared her story publicly about her transition as a trans woman in January 2023. Her story has been featured in the New York Times, the Washington Post, and CBS Mornings. So, Bernie, welcome to the show. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Thank you so much for having me, Sai. Well, my background is really radio. That was when I was growing up, I wanted to be a radio announcer, and I would practice my voice by reading the newspaper out loud in the basement when I was a kid. And I was lucky enough to actually live that dream. About a year after I graduated college, this new company called Shadow Traffic came to New York, and I was selected as one of the original traffic reporters for Shadow Traffic. And that was a great opportunity because here I was, 23 years old, fresh out of school, and I was on the air in the biggest market in the country, New York City. Not only that, but I was on during what they call drive time, the morning and afternoon rush hours, when the most listeners are tuned into radio. And some of our younger listeners may not fully appreciate this, but radio was sort of the internet of its day. It was where you found out the headlines, the sports scores from last night, the weather forecast, time checks, traffic reports, all of that information. And it was a companion for you as you were going through your daily routine. So that was kind of my start. And being a traffic reporter ended up being my entree into the world of transportation. I never thought that I would become a transportation person, but I ended up working in that, sort of combined my two interests of communications and transportation. Ended up doing some podcasts, but I'm also a voice actor. So I have the voice not only of the New York City subway, but for anybody who might fly in or out of Newark Liberty International Airport, I'm the voice on the monorail there. I'm the voice on a transit line called Patco, which runs between South Jersey and Philadelphia. So I do a few different things like that.
That is so awesome. You have one of those voices that has like that calming effect. And when you're traveling, that's one thing I think is a really big, important thing because it's very anxiety provoking. So I can see why you stood out for that. So, about how old were you when you started doing the voice acting for the subway?
Well, let's see. It was 2009 when I did the recording. So I would have been about 53 years old when I started doing those recordings.
Okay, so that's really awesome because it shows how a lot of people get this idea that there's this time limit on success or achieving these crazy dreams, but you're proof that that's not the case. And I love that. I love to, let people know that I have a friend who is a voice actor and he's been looking really diligently to find different opportunities. He's done a few projects, but that's one of the things that sometimes I think people, I'm in my early 40s and I think he's maybe 5 years younger than me. So starting to feel that am I running out of time? But no,
No,
obviously not.
if you have the desire and you have the patience, I think it's possible to do something at really any age. And I'm proof of that.
Absolutely. Okay, and when you contributed to the Warriors album, what was it like working alongside Lin-Manuel Miranda and Issa Davis?
That was unbelievable. I would joke that I had to wear long sleeve tops after I did that because all the black and blue marks from where I was pinching myself saying, "This can't be real. I must be having a dream." I got a call one day from a sound engineer who was up in Toronto, Canada. And he said, "We're working on a project. I can't tell you anything more about it until you sign a non disclosure agreement, but we'd like to use your voice." Now, I've done a few small things in the past with different records and things of that sort. So I figured that that's what this was. And when I returned the signed NDA, he told me, "This is for an album that Lin-Manuel Miranda and Issa Davis are doing, and we'd like you to be a part of it. Lin is a big fan of yours." And my reaction was, "Oh my gosh, Lin-Manuel Miranda knows who I am? I can't believe this." And I had seen the original cast of Hamilton. I was pretty familiar with Lin and a lot of his work. But then one day last June, a year ago this past June, I go into the studios of Atlantic Records in New York City and recorded my lines. I'm on about 5 different tracks on the album. And to be there with Lin giving me direction was this unbelievable thing. I am not a singer, so I never anticipated being part of a musical. Obviously, I'm not singing on this, but still, it was this amazing, amazing opportunity that I never could have anticipated.
Those are the best, I think, when it just comes together and all of those opportunities just present themselves. But it really is, it's a lot of hard work. So it sounds like you actually did quite a bit of voice acting before you got to that point if you started in 2009. Are there any particular projects that you found particularly fun aside from this big one, apparently?
All of them have their own special qualities. I've done, I mentioned it before about Patco, the transit line which runs between South Jersey and Philadelphia. And for a few holiday seasons, they wanted me to play different characters to remind people to do things like not to put their bags on the seats and things like that. So I had to be Santa Claus. I would go to the ho, 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 Santa here reminding you not to put your bags on the seats. So things like that could be a little bit of fun too.
That sounds pretty cool. Okay, so this one's going over a little bit to you being courageous enough to come out with your transition journey. You did that in January 2023. Can you tell us what that journey has been like for you personally and professionally since?
Sure. Well, first of all, I think this is true for many trans people. It is very scary when you're anticipating doing this kind of change because you don't know what life is going to be like. You don't know what the reaction is going to be from those who are big parts of your life, whether they're work colleagues, family, friends, neighbors, etc. So that's the first part. But then once it happened, it has been just one amazing thing after another. You talked about the stories with the New York Times, the Washington Post. The CBS story was particularly meaningful because they had asked me to write a letter to a younger version of myself, 18-year-old. And so I got to read that and present it on network television. It was a little bit scary, because it's usually I'm being interviewed and you just have to hopefully come up with some coherent answers to whatever
Right.
the interviewer was asking. But this was reading what I wrote, and that was a bit scary. But I've done interviews with media from Brazil, Germany, the Netherlands, Japan, Canada. So I've been shocked at how much interest there has been in my story. And I think a lot of that really is because it revolves around my voice. My voice for people who are in New York or who visit New York is relatively well known. And there's a certain mystery behind these voices that we hear that you don't know who it is. So finding out that this person that almost every New Yorker knows my voice, there's a story behind that. I think that was what sparked a lot of the media interest. But I've even done other things. I had a short film that was done a year or two ago that won a number of awards. So there's been a lot of fun activities that, again, I never would have expected.
Can you tell us a little bit more about that short film? That sounds interesting.
Sure. It was done by an ad agency in New York City, and they do a pro bono project every year. And they had seen the story in the New York Times, and they said, we'd like to do this project centered on you. So we went into the city for a couple of days where they filmed. And it was in many ways more like acting than when I'm usually doing an interview because here there was particular direction. Okay, we want you to walk down the stairs, close the umbrella, turn to your right, look to your left, all these different things. And every part of it was done 3 or 4 times to make sure they had the shot the way they wanted it to be. And it's only 3 minutes and 47 seconds long, but it's won awards in Cannes, France. It won several Clio Awards, which is one of the biggest ad awards in advertising. It's won some film festival awards, and it's just a very dramatic way because of the music that's produced with it and how they shot it to tell my story in a relatively short time, but in a very dramatic way. And it's something that can be shared with people in all sorts of, as long as they've got an internet connection, they can watch it.
Well, that sounds very impactful. I mean, and I think people sometimes, like you said, it's short, but if it takes so many takes in order to get it perfectly, and then it results in that kind of slew of accolades, that's a success, and that's a big deal for a short film. So that's
Yeah.
really awesome, and congratulations to you on that. For listeners who might be aspiring voice actors or anyone who is navigating the transitional journey, what's some key lessons or piece of advice regarding these two topics that you would give us?
Well, one of the things that I would say is find people who can be supportive to you, whatever your journey is, because there are plenty of naysayers out there who will say, oh, you can't do it. This isn't going to work. And to have those people around you who can be supportive, that's a big part. A second part, I think, is just patience and persistence. I was going to combine the two words, make up a new word, but patience and persistence, I think, are also important. That you can't be discouraged, that you never know where opportunities are going to come. When it came to voiceover work, that wasn't something that I particularly pursued. My background was radio, and I was very happy doing radio, but it's a close cousin of voiceover work. So when people asked if I wanted to do particular projects, I figured, sure, this sounds like fun. Why not give it a shot? And it's led to so many different opportunities. But if there's somebody listening who would like to get into voiceover, what I usually suggest is start with something that you know. Whether it's a career that you've had, you know a lot about the real estate industry or restaurants or whatever it may be, use that as the entree point. Think of where voice can be used in these different types of businesses and do some things. Maybe it's just at no pay and for the experience at the start, but it's a place to build up a resume, build up experience. You don't have to spend a ton of money on equipment to get started. Find out if you like doing it. You can get a relatively inexpensive microphone, plug it into a computer, and you're off and running.
That's really awesome, and it sounds like it's really just more about having the willingness to build the confidence in your voice and to know what you're talking about so that the deliverability is cohesive.
Mhm. Yeah, it's surprising, just knowing how to pronounce words, for example, that aren't part of everyone else's vocabulary. If it's the lingo, whatever the business is, and knowing something about it, it makes you already something of an expert for that field. So that's a key part to take advantage of.
Alright, so do you have any particular incidences that you'd like to share with us about your transition journey of where you have found community?
Sure, I found it in a number of different places. First of all, among other trans people, because they have the experience. So they can help they guided me to things that I might expect. When I ran into problems, they could be there again for that support to provide encouragement and things of that sort. So that's maybe one of the first places. A second place are those that you come in contact with all the time, good friends, family that can be there to support. I may have always felt that I was female, but there's still a lot I didn't know about being female. There's still a lot that I still don't know about being female. So, cisgender women, and cisgender is somebody who is born in the gender that they feel themselves to be. They can be there as great friends to provide guidance and help you get over some of these difficulties that you may have starting up, particularly if you transition later in life, as I did. So, that can be a great help. And then for me, my community, the town I live in, Cranford, New Jersey, the folks here have been wonderful. I came out publicly as trans at a community meeting before I even knew I was going to socially transition. And there were people at that meeting like the superintendent of schools, the mayor, the police chief, and others. And they were all very supportive of my journey and let me know that they were supportive. It's great to have support, but it's even better when you know that those people are vocal in their support and have told you that they support. So those are just a few, but some of my colleagues in the business, both transportation and in broadcasting, have been wonderful with it. I talked to my clients before I transitioned. They all said, we're behind you. So it's been many different places. And there are places that you don't get that support, but you try to move on from that. And that's their issue. It's not hopefully my issue.
Right. Well, it sounds like it's been overwhelmingly supportive, and that is amazing because not everybody gets that journey, but it's really wonderful when you do. And for people that may not have had that support, what would you suggest that they do in order to gain up the courage to live authentically?
I would say if you don't have that support where you live, one of the nice things about this day and age can be the internet. And there are safe places to go online where you will find people who can be supportive. There are groups and things of that sort. You can participate in support groups remotely, and they can be on the other side of the continent, and you still have that opportunity to gather with people and to share. But as you search, I think you'll find there are people locally that can be supportive in your community or at least in your region. So you have that warm blooded flesh, in a sense, not just a picture on a screen, but somebody who you can hug or shake their hand that can be there for you. And that's true for any difficult journey that somebody is going through. It's not just a transition of gender, it can be disease, a death, losing a job. There's a lot of different things that we all go through in life. And to have somebody that you can turn to, that you can just cry on their shoulder and that you know that they're not to give judgment, but just to let you know that they support you, that can mean so much.
Yeah, it's that holding that safe space for people, and it looks different in different situations because we all have
Mhm.
different needs. But I really love the way you put that because in a lot of aspects, a transition is when any change is happening, and they often do happen to us sometimes abruptly and without us even having the will for them and just having people we can turn to. That's particularly poignant. I wanted to ask you if you were in New York when September 11th, 2001 happened, and if any of that played into your voice work moving forward through doing subway and transit.
A little bit. I was actually here at my home in New Jersey. I was planning to go to a meeting that was going to be taking place in Atlantic City that involved a number of different transportation agencies, including the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey, which own the World Trade Center. I had been an employee of the Port Authority for about a decade. So I was watching my former workplace under attack and knowing that people that I had worked with were in that building. So it was a scary moment, I think, for almost everyone, but it was especially scary for somebody who had connections. And I had been in the World Trade Center about 2.5 weeks before 9/11. The biggest thing that it affected, this was before I did a lot of my transit voice work, but on July 4th, I think 2 years after the attack, they had what they called a cornerstone laying for what at the time was being called the Freedom Tower, the replacement building, or the building that would be on the site of the World Trade Center. And this took place in the pit where they had excavated for the Twin Towers. And I was asked to be the announcer for that event. So I was able to introduce the governors of New York and New Jersey, the mayor of New York, different dignitaries that were speaking that day. But it was probably the most meaningful voice opportunity I had ever had and ever expect to have, to be in that place where thousands of people had died, to be speaking in front of many survivors of family members and others who were there that day. That is something that I will always remember and cherish.
Yeah, that sounds like that was a very special moment in life, and, to be at ground zero and to be able to do that is quite an honor in spite of it being such a sacred and place that's just etched in memory as a tragic site, so I can only imagine how that felt on so many levels and the nuances of it.
Yeah, it definitely felt very moving.
Yes. It's a very inspiring story that you have. I'm honestly very honored to be speaking with you today, and, we got about 10 minutes left of time here. Is there anything particularly poignant you wanna share with us that you feel like, kind of speaks to your career and what you stand for as a person?
Well, a few things come to mind. These days, if I have an opportunity to mentor someone and they ask for advice, it used to be that I would say to younger people, take advantage of opportunities that come up before you. And that's still great advice, but I've modified it to now create opportunities for yourself. Don't wait for the opportunities to just present themselves. If there are times where you can do something, that's how I created a newsletter that's led to other newsletters that I do for clients. It's how I've got involved with podcasting for different clients about transportation by taking a chance and giving it a shot and seeing where it went. And those kinds of things can open up all different doors of possibility are not going to be the same as mine. They're going to be unique to every individual. But that is one of the biggest things. Another thing I would say, and this is probably true for older people in general, is that you have a lot of fear when you're younger of trying new things. Is this going to work? What if this doesn't work? Well, for most things, if it doesn't work, it's a learning experience. It's not the end of the world. Don't be afraid to try things, to take a risk, to experiment. with things because you never know who you're going to meet, the opportunities that are going to present themselves. The voiceover jobs that I've done, most of them came about not because I sought them out, but because people sought me out. And that was in part because I made a decision that I was going to be visible. For me, this part is very personal, but I think it's true for most of us as individuals. We have something unique about ourselves. And for me, that is my gender transition has been something that's caught a lot of people's attention. And I made a decision early on in the process that I wanted to be an educator. I wanted to use the communication skills I had developed from being on the radio for many years and doing interviews of people and things of that sort to share my story with others because I know from experience, trans people make up only about 1% of the population. So there's not a lot of personal knowledge that many people have of transgender individuals. They are aware of stereotypes and stories that they hear. But like most stereotypes, there's a lot of untruth in those stereotypes. And so if I have the opportunity to share my story for an individual to get to know me a little bit better, to know a trans person that they may not have ever come in contact with otherwise, I try to take advantage of those opportunities to share my story. And as you said, it's led to a lot of different media opportunities, but it's also led to small things. I've been to book clubs here in my hometown where it's only 4 or 5 people that I'm talking to, but it's a great chance to develop a connection with those people. And that's invaluable, I think.
I totally agree. The value of smaller communities and speaking, I feel like is it allows you a little bit more of an intimate setting to be able to connect with the individual. Whereas when you're at large conventions and speaking events, yes, everyone, you're the announcer, everyone can hear you, obviously, but you don't necessarily get to have those interactions one on one with people.
Mhm, mhm. And that is one of the things that I learned from watching Lin-Manuel Miranda. He shot to fame 10 years ago with Hamilton when it came out, and I watch how he interacts with his fans and how he's so down to earth, and he's the same person in small, intimate settings that he is in large public gatherings. He's certainly extremely talented in so many other things, but he doesn't let that go to his head. He allows the fans to get to know him on a more personal basis, and that is something that I wanna learn from when I'm never going to achieve that level of fame, but even on my small level, that I wanna make sure I maintain that connection with people who have an interest. So if they want me to sign something or to take a selfie with them, I am always happy to oblige those requests.
That's awesome. And that's radiating kindness into a world that really needs it.
Mhm, mhm. Yeah, I think that that's very important, that opportunities to show kindness, to show love, to show support, they are so valuable and so important, and when we have opportunities to do that, it can be just small acts of kindness. It doesn't have to be something monumental. It can just be a little thing, and it can help make a person's day.
Yes. And I think that that's really important because they say that often, you don't know what you could say, what one word could change someone's day. And with you working and your voice being so recognizable, that's a really beautiful to kind of close up the interview on. I do really appreciate you taking the time to speak with me today, Bernie. It's just been really great to hear all of your different experiences and insights. And I can't thank you enough for coming to talk to me.
Well, thank you so much, Sai, for having me on. I have enjoyed chatting with you, and hopefully we'll have an opportunity to talk some more in the future.
Of course, I would love that. Again, you guys, Bernie has a podcast, and you can learn more about her by looking up Bernie Wagenblast. And I will probably have some links to some pages for social media connections if you'd like to follow her further from there. And that is going to be our show for this afternoon. Thank you again for being on the Mind of Cy Marie. Have a wonderful day. Bye.
Thank you.